So I've been thinking about technology, particularly digital technology, and the impact it has on our everyday lives. I'm saying this in the context of quite a development for me. My first ever smartphone. Here it is. Second hand, I got it on eBay. And the last few hours, basically since I opened it, I've just been navigating my way around it. There's a few things that I'm having some difficulty with setting up. Um, I'll just ask very briefly, just in case anyone happens to know. I'm trying to set up WeChat, which is a Chinese social networking system, and I keep getting a message. This is an LG. I haven't got the screen switch on just now. This is an LG Optimus version phone, and the message I keep getting every time I try to download WeChat is you need the latest version of WeChat to kind of go ahead with this. And it's frustrating because this is one of the main reasons I got a smartphone. I'm going to China soon and I want to use my WeChat over there. WeChat is now far more commonly used than QQ if you're familiar with Chinese websites. It's frustrating because it feels so close, yet it's just not letting me go ahead. So basically, if you have an LG Optimus phone, do you know how to download WeChat? That's that out of the way. That's just kind of in passing. I'm asking if anyone happens to know about that. Now, I want to talk about the wider issue about how much we rely on technology. So I mentioned that's my first ever smartphone. For the last 7 years, I've been using this. It's literally just a very basic mobile phone. Phone calls, text messages. There's one very basic game, but it's not a smartphone. It's just a basic mobile phone. And it served me well. I've used it for years, but in recent sort of months, it's been quite lax. It's been sort of timing out of phone calls very fast. It's been, well, it's clearly run its course, but for a phone that costs £10, I can hardly complain. Um, it served its purpose, which is what I like. I like things to serve their purpose, and it's done that. But I feel like a late starter with a lot of things to do with technology. This laptop that I'm speaking in right now, it's my second laptop, but my first laptop I got in 2012. That was far later than most of the people I knew. For the 2000s, basically, I was using a very slow desktop computer. Um, so it's almost like I've been a decade behind everyone else in every big thing. Not everyone else, but everyone in this society, in a developed country, you know. So my first smartphone I've got today, you know, most people, it's probably an old model. Most people are using smartphones, have been using smartphones for at least the last 10 years. My first laptop I didn't get until, like I say, 2012. Um, but, you know, none of this is about feeling bitterness or like, oh, I was missing out. In fact, quite the opposite. Um, don't get me wrong, I think that technology can have wonderful benefits. And I would be a complete hypocrite if I didn't recognize that. I mean, what I'm doing right now, uploading YouTube videos, sharing my views with the world, would be impossible without YouTube. YouTube as a website, you know, it's just one of many. YouTube, Facebook, you name it. So much of our lives today circulates around what we do online that it is very difficult to imagine even the 1990s. I mean, the 1990s are now looking more and more distant, not so much in terms of politics and that sort of thing, but more in terms of just, you know, a world without Facebook, a world without YouTube, a world without smartphones, or at least not smartphones that were commercially so widespread, you know, tablets, etc. I've been watching The X Files, of course, made in the 1990s, and I'm thinking, this, on one hand, doesn't seem so far back because I grew up with it. Mulder and Scully. But then on the other hand, this is really far back because this was a world where only business people had really high tech cell phones, never mind smartphones. So when you look at things in a certain way, it is interesting to see how far we've come. Yeah, in many other ways, we've a long way to go. There's a lot of things, for example, if you look at futuristic films that were made in the 1980s, how they perceived the world to be today, we've still got a long way to go. Robot technology has come a long way, but it's not quite the level that dystopian films of the past perceived it would be at this point. We're not seeing hovercraft, we're not seeing a lot of things. A big part of that, I think, is the global recession slowed the world down a lot of the late 2000s. But there's other factors as well. There is understandable ethical questions about a lot of these things. Um, there's a few things. Well, let me break this up. There's things I like and there's things I dislike. What do I like? I like the fact that all this sort of social communication can have enormous benefits in terms of keeping in touch with friends in other countries, in terms of keeping in touch with family when you're traveling, in terms of sharing memories, sharing photographs, sharing experiences, in terms of campaigning. It can have some real ethical strengths. You can bring awareness to human rights issues, to animal welfare issues, in a way that might not have been possible in the past. Many of the world's big um, social news stories, social developments, have in part been inspired and promoted by social media. Thinking of the Egyptian revolution in 2011 and the wider Arab Spring, um, it goes without saying that many of the conflicts in the world today are largely fueled by social media, and it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. It can be a bad thing in the sense that that can inflame tensions, particularly with the phenomenon of fake news, but can be a good thing in terms of spreading awareness and galvanizing support. Also, armies are perhaps in some ways less likely to commit atrocities in the way they would have in the past because the eyes of the world are watching them. I think there is more international scrutiny than ever before. So, could something like the Rwanda genocide happen today with the prevalence of social media that wasn't necessarily around in the 90s? Well, it's hard to say. The Rwandan genocide was actually fueled by radio because Hutu, so-called Hutu Power Radio, stirred up ethnic hatred of the Tutsis. So conceivably, that could therefore be done on social media. On the other hand, they might be more aware of that scrutiny that comes with social media. We've seen how inflammatory social media could be. Someone could say something, and then it is elevated 1,000 times into something much bigger. So the power of social media is immense. It really is. And people can no longer afford to sort of, especially public figures in the past, they might have said something controversial. It might have made news headlines for a while, but it wouldn't have had the same sort of resonance with the public in terms of public engagement. Take, for example, Watergate. Watergate would have been reported in the news and people would have been discussing it in their pub or their place of work, but it wouldn't have had the instantaneous micro analysis and opinionating that you would get with social media. So the whole dynamics have radically changed, and that can be, a video in itself. But that's really a negative side of it. How there's a lot of other things we can look at, cyberbullying. When kids are targeted because of the way they look, things like that. And then you get some really dark things on the internet, the dark web. When you get obviously child pornography, but also Islamists, using it to promote jihadist videos of them beheading people. And there's some real sick things online. Um, and that's a real creepy side of the internet. It's a real you also get a lot of situations whereby you get, young people getting into street fights and then they promote it online. And sometimes this has hundreds of thousands of views. Again, it's not that this didn't happen in the past. But the difference would have been that, okay, if you had like this sort of street fight situation, you would have had 50 people watching it. Now you get those 50 people watching it, but then you get hundreds of thousands of total strangers watching it and commenting on it. There's something I find very disturbing about that, because it elevates potential bullying on a scale that wouldn't have happened in the past. So bullying has always been a problem, but it's elevated in a different way today that is very difficult to control, and that's very sinister. I do think social networking sites have too often kind of used the excuse of, oh well, it's free speech, so we have no responsibility. Our users, they have to self-police. I think there's times they could act and they don't. And then there's other times they're too draconian when they don't need to be. When they, for example, banned images of tribeswomen for in cultural studies or whatever, and then that's promoting nudity. But then they've allowed violent drill videos that are blatantly promoting violence, and there's been no issue with that. So there's a lot of contradictions there. Um, that's a side of it I don't like. Another side of the increasing social reliance on digital media, and I'm not just talking about websites like Facebook and YouTube. I'm talking about the rise of smartphone technology, is that it's become a fashion thing. It's become this kind of almost like a popularity contest that you have to have a latest model. The Galaxy smartphone, whatever, the latest. I mean, this is how little I know about it, but I think you get what I'm saying. It's always about the latest model, and you know, I find that rather polarizing because very often these are not cheap. The lower end models go for hundreds. I just find it crazy that people wait for hours outside an Apple store to pay £800 for a phone. And okay, it might have features that my second-hand phone that I've just bought won't have. It might be far more sharp. It may have a lot more app possibilities and so on. But I do think a lot of it is becoming about, frankly, image. And it seems just a bit of a facade. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not some sort of Luddite who is totally against technology. I totally recognize it has many uses, but I'm a bit wary of this idea of putting people on this pedestal where they have to get the latest technology, otherwise they're kind of polarized. I find that a little bit, it's something we need to be a bit wary of. This idea that you can only keep in touch with people if you have the latest technology. It becomes kind of like people are being forced into this through almost peer pressure or through these big gurus who run these organizations saying that you'll only. I'm trying to word this in the best way I can. I really do think there is a social science behind this, and it's hard to put in words, but it becomes a little bit overwhelming when you see, well, what model do you have? What's the latest iPhone? What's the latest smartphone? What's the latest iPad? What's the latest laptop? And you find that you're always trying to update to keep up with the trend. So you end up spending a fortune, but more to the point, I just find that whenever you feel that okay, well, I've updated this, I'm now using this website because that's what my friends use. And then you find a week later, oh, well, everyone's using this now. I mean, I was using QQ for a long time, which was again a Chinese social networking site, and it has definitely served me well. It's allowed me to keep in touch with people. Now all my Chinese friends say, "Oh well, everyone's using WeChat," and I'll download WeChat if I can, and it'll be great. And then everyone will say, "Oh well, people are not using that anymore," and you get similar things with Western websites. So I find that can be quite polarizing, where it becomes kind of it almost feels like you're coerced into getting the latest model of everything. And it's not that anyone's holding a gun to your head and saying you have to get it, but it's almost like a social pressure. And it's difficult to explain, but I think possibly you'll know what I mean. It just feels like everything is about the latest model and this and that and the other. What I want with a smartphone is I can make phone calls, text messages, access the internet, and right now I want to download WeChat, but I don't want to be the absolute best pristine quality phone. I just want it to work, you know. So for me, that's an aspect I find off-putting. I also feel that there are definitely social implications of people's reliance on digital technology. Ask yourself this: how many times have you been to a house party or even a social gathering where you look around, let's say you have 20 people in a room, 10 of them are looking at their phones and they're texting away? There's something quite sad about that. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that people should just put away their phones and that's it, but my big concern is we can get to a point where we're relying so much on digital technology that we forget basic humanity. We forget raw flesh and blood humanity, face to face. I mean, these things really can be very beneficial. They let us keep in touch with friends. Sometimes they can actually improve social communication, but definitely that example I just gave, I think, is a good one. When you look around and you see people, they're meant to be at a party. A party in the 1980s and 1990s was people dancing, people talking to each other, people, okay, making out, whatever. But it certainly wasn't people gathered around spending the whole time texting on a phone about doing something else when they're meant to be taking in the moment. I find that rather sad, but it's such a potential now for people to get sucked into that sort of mindset, and it's no one's fault. It's just this collective reliance on technology where we get so hooked on it that we feel like we can't live without it. And I freely admit, if you ask me to spend an entire day without my laptop, without phone, without any sort of, even the DVD player, without any sort of technology other than the light bulb, I'd find it difficult. I would. And a few times I pushed myself and I've just about managed to get by a day. But that to me shows how reliant we are on this. And maybe in the future it's going to become even more so. So I'm going to close with this. Set yourself a challenge. After watching my video, turn off your smartphone, turn off your laptop, whatever you're using to watch this. Go for a walk. Doesn't need to be a big hike, just a walk in the fresh air, in the outdoors, in the real world. Maybe invite a friend for a coffee. But do something that isn't involving your smartphone or your laptop. And just see if you can do it. Because I think it is so important that we do not forget our basics, the real world. Because all these things, all this digital technology can be wonderful. It can let us keep in touch with friends and family. It can help spread campaigns and awareness. It can enable us to buy things more conveniently. It can do many positive things. But we must be very careful that it never replaces basic real world humanity, face to face communication, real world experiences, the freshness of the great outdoors. Call it what you will. That to me is extremely important. I do not want a world where in 2058, 2068, 2078, the world is so unrecognizable because everything is digitalized, every single thing. Are we going to get to a point where food is digitalized? To me, that would be a very bleak world. And I don't know, my mind might adapt to it. I might think, oh, well, I can adapt to this, I can adapt to that. But once upon a time, a window was something you looked out of. Once upon a time, a cookie was a sort of type of biscuit that you ate. Once upon a time, a mouse was a furry little mammal. I'm just making the point that All these things can be good, but we have to allow ourselves to also appreciate the real world, because you could be in a survival situation where you have to. And this millennial generation and generations to come could find themselves so reliant on digital technology that if they ever had to survive without that, they wouldn't. You know, they would be like, I don't know a good analogy, but that's the point I'd like to make. So let me know your thoughts and try that. When you finish watching this video, push yourself, try hard, go for a walk, invite a friend for a coffee, do something that doesn't directly involve, at that time, your smartphone or your laptop. See if you can do it. Good luck. And I'm going to try it myself. Thanks for watching.